A few weeks ago, I asked Breaking Points and Counterpoints viewers to help support the launch of the new independent nonprofit news outlet I was launching with my old colleague Jeremy Scahill, and a humbling number of you did so. The launch has gone so well that I can now announce the hiring of another former colleague, Murtaza Hussain, who you've seen here on the show. We've also hired The Intercept's former deputy editor, Nausicaa Renner, and have plans to continue growing as long as the support keeps growing. So if you still want to subscribe with the Counterpoints discount, go to dropsitenews.com/counterpoints, or you can find the link down below. Now, yesterday we published a new report by Murtaza looking at a single conflict over a West Bank home just outside of Bethlehem. With all of the focus on Gaza, Iran, and the soft war in the north with Hezbollah, it's easy to lose sight of what's happening in the West Bank, a creeping de facto annexation, property by property. The fight over the family home of Alice Kaisia has been heating up the past week. So the family property once hosted not just their home, but a restaurant they had built. That was before settlers vandalized and demolished it. Now it is home to a makeshift campground the family guards fiercely, while Israeli settlers, with the active help of the IDF, have managed to squat on a portion of it. The family isn't leaving without a fight, and their stand has drawn the support of some Israelis and Western activists, who are hoping their presence will slow down the process. So the family has gone to court numerous times to try and assert legal protection over the property, only to see those claims ignored on the ground by settler activists guarded by Israeli soldiers. So the poster on the right here in this photo is a blown-up version of the property record showing that they are the proper owners. So a number of representatives from the group Combatants for Peace, which is a mixed group of former Israeli and Palestinian combatants turned solidarity activists, have attempted to physically block settlers from displacing the Kaisia family from their property. In recent days, armed soldiers have arrested demonstrators or physically driven them off the site. Meanwhile, more settlers have arrived who have vandalized the Kaisia's remaining property, including a statue of the Virgin Mary owned by the family that was found smashed at the site. Not that it should matter, by the way, that these are Christian Palestinians. In video from the property shared with DropSite, groups of settlers guarded by IDF soldiers can be seen mocking the family and activists who have come to defend them while trying to break into a gate surrounding their land. So last Friday, Amato Sisson, an activist from New Jersey with the solidarity group Fazia, joined fellow demonstrators near the West Bank village of Beta, not far from the Kaisia home. In an interview with Murtaza after being discharged from the hospital, Sisson said he was taking part in a, quote, protective presence exercise aimed at defending Palestinian citizens living in the West Bank from settler and military violence. He said that the IDF began firing live rounds at them, and they ran into a nearby olive grove. It was then that he felt what he said was a, quote, blunt impact in the back of his leg. He initially thought he had been hit by a tear gas canister. It turned out to have been a live bullet, which entered his thigh and exited from the front of his leg. In video of the incident provided to DropSite, you can see his friends and fellow activists carrying him here away from the olive grove and toward a pickup truck, which would then take him to a hospital in Nablus. We asked the State Department for comment on Sisson's shooting and got the following statement. Quote, "We are aware of these reports involving a U.S. citizen in the West Bank and are in contact with local authorities to gather more information. We are greatly concerned when any U.S. citizen is harmed overseas and work to provide consular assistance. We reiterate our advice to U.S. citizens to reconsider travel to the West Bank. Over the past few months, there has been an increase in extremist violence and military activity. Due to privacy considerations, we have no further comment," unquote. So after being shot, Sisson was treated and discharged from the hospital in Nablus. He was lucky. The bullet that struck his thigh did not hit any major arteries or bone, and he's expected to recover. Now, while the shooting has gotten zero attention in the U.S., it did get some coverage in the local Israeli press, where a spokesperson for the IDF said troops had, quote, used riot dispersal means and fired live rounds in the air to disperse a, quote, gathering in the area near the settlement outpost. The statement added that, quote, a report was received regarding a foreign national who was accidentally injured by the riot dispersal means and was evacuated to the hospital, unquote. A number of Americans have been killed or wounded by the IDF in recent years, including both Palestinian citizens living in or visiting the West Bank and U.S. activists like Sisson. Earlier this month, the U.S. government announced that it would not pursue Leahy Act sanctions against an Israeli military unit the Netza Yehuda Battalion, implicated in the death of an elderly Palestinian-American man, Omar Assad, who died after being bound and left exposed to the elements by soldiers from the unit. 2 Palestinian-American teenagers have also been killed in separate shooting incidents by the IDF in the West Bank since the start of this year. The U.S. government has taken halting steps in recent months to sanction particularly violent settler leaders. The sanctions stop some individuals and groups associated with the most extreme fringe of the settler movement from accessing the U.S. financial system, while also targeting selected outposts in the West Bank for blacklisting by banks. The Biden administration, which is being sued over the sanctions by pro-settler groups in the U.S., has hinted that these limited sanctions measures could theoretically expand in the future to target more of the settlement enterprise. Now, while President Biden has promised U.S. retaliation for violent attacks targeting Americans elsewhere in the region, there has been near radio silence over a steady drumbeat of violent incidents that have affected U.S. citizens in the West Bank at the hands of the Israeli military or settler groups. That selective interest and concern by the U.S. government over violence targeting its own citizens has frustrated Sisson. He told Murtaza, "Biden has said that if any U.S. citizen is attacked, we will respond. Yet there have been multiple times now this hasn't been the case," unquote. And so I guess Sisson thought that Biden was going to respond to violence against him. He was guilty of a little bit of wishful thinking, but I think he probably knew better. Like, I think that he understood going in that if our partners, as the State Department calls them every day at the briefing, if our partners are the ones that do the shooting, you're not really going to hear much about it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. For me personally, one of the incidents, a fairly recent one, relative to the scope of this tragedy, that started to, well, I don't know. I think the U.S. response to it was so pathetic that it started. I don't even know what the right way to put it is, but the Shireen Abu Akleh killing, the way our government responded to it.
Palestinian-American, right.
Palestinian-American, Christian, journalist, all of these different categories that Americans obviously purport, and Israelis obviously purport on the world stage to care about. The responses were just disappointing, would be putting it mildly. They were absurd. The responses to what happened there were absurd. So these incidents are, when you look at how the various governments respond to them, it, I think, tells you a lot about what we put up with in our foreign policy.
Right.
And that's just a really basic way. I mean, like, that's a 30,000 foot view, but I mean, it's just.
No, that's the view. That's the view that will give you the correct vantage point.
Yeah. It's
every
crazy.
time.
I mean, it's crazy. And it's the same thing when you talk about how the Biden administration cites the ICC in relation to Putin and, doesn't have any use for the ICC in relation to Israel, and talking about the rules-based international order when it suits you and not when it doesn't. It's just turning a blind eye, willfully, intentionally. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and in interviews with my colleague Jeremy, who helped me launch DropSite, Hamas officials have said that what's going on in the West Bank was a significant driver of their decision to launch the attacks on October 7th, because the deck is being rearranged, and every time that another large piece of property is taken, there's not a lot of property left to be taken. Then it becomes that much more difficult then to get to a political resolution, especially when Israel continues to say that the key stumbling block for any agreement is this Palestinian demand of right of return, that they get some of the land back. And so as they continue to lose land and continue to be told that there will be no land that comes back in an eventual political process, it makes the political process seem untenable. And there's that old famous saying that, like, those who make peaceful resolutions tenable make violent resolutions inevitable. So, that's a paraphrase, but it's something like that. But that is what you see going on here.
Yeah, no, that's a really well applied phrase here. And I think what I was trying to say earlier is also just like Israel-Palestine has never been one of my top issues. I'm far from an expert in it. But the propaganda surrounding, because we were doing the show actually together, and we were covering what happened to Shireen Abu Akleh. And normally, because it's not one of my top issues, I just sort of like don't dig into what's happening if I don't have to, because I don't have to talk about it.
These people I trust are saying things. I'm gonna
or just like don't. It's not one of my top issues, so I'm not thinking about it all of the time. And because we had to think about it when we were covering it, you peeling back the layers of the propaganda, and it's to me, and I know to a lot of viewers, it's going to sound naive, this has been one of their top issues for years and years. But when I was sort of forced to reckon with the propaganda, it's not to say that there isn't crazy propaganda on the other side, because there is. But when I was reckoning with the propaganda from the U.S. and Israel in that case study, it was shocking, shockingly bad. Which again sounds naive to people who've been following this for a really long time, but it's never been one of my top issues. And when you're forced to peel back the layers of the Israeli propaganda, it is insane.
I don't think anybody should ever feel guilty about not knowing something, because nobody is born knowing everything.
Totally.
Like everybody
we all have our issue areas.
Everybody comes to things. It's either they come to you sometimes, or you come to them. But for you, it was Shireen that really kind of broke through, or?
Yeah, it was, and I think you would probably say this too. The propaganda in that case, when you have so many, I mean, it was insane. You had the bullet patterns on the trees. You had all of the audio and video analysis. You had all of these categories that both countries claim to be protective of and revere in one case study. I mean, everything was wrapped up in that case study. So I think, there have been various incidents over the years. I'm like, oh yeah, this propaganda is crazy, but that one was just unreal. It was all tied together in such a tragically perfect kind of situation.
Yeah, well, that's well said. And it takes flexibility and courage to like think things through in a plastic way. So.
Well, your reporting is always so helpful, and I'm loving everything on DropSite. Incredibly good reporting. Well,
thank you. Very, very, very much appreciate it. And thank you to everybody else who's supported it. It's been really gratifying and encouraging. So there'll be more of this to come for sure.
You'll love to see it. Well, not really, but you'll love to see the good reporting.
Right, there you go.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.